There's a long history of people's confrontation of each other's cultures, certainly through human history and in the present as well. And in some cases we see a lot of intolerance where people look at other human beings and they think, well, we don't really understand their cultures, we don't believe in what they do, and therefore they're either inferior or they're other. And I think what we discover when specialists, anthropologists, historians, others look at the achievements of other cultures, they find not ignorance in other people's cultures, but often insight, understanding, and real benefit to one's own culture. And so I think if we look at cultures and saying, you know, all these cultures arose for a reason. At one time, everybody's culture was innovative. It solved certain problems for human beings, whether those problems were crises of conscience or they were a matter of getting food or curing one's children. And so I think there's a lot of insight in all different cultures. And it's hard to say where the next insight will come that will, you know, solve solve cancer, for example. It may be in the medical laboratories of the United States, it may be in the laboratories of China or India, but it also may be in the folk knowledge of a practitioner, a healer from the Amazon rainforest. It may come out of Central Africa, where there's some insight that could be a cure for a disease that plagues all human beings. There may be a thought that's thunk in Cambodia, or another one that comes out of Korea, or another one that comes out of Argentina or Peru, where somebody says, wow, that is a wonderful way to think about our role on the planet. And so I think we have a great deal to gain from each other's cultures. And so I look at culture as kind of a living library, an archive, certainly in the past, but also a living laboratory for the exploration of creativity and of innovation. It could be of tremendous value to all of us. You know, sometimes we think that the heritage is just of those people in those countries, but, you know, remember, I think the whole world mourned when the Bamiyan Buddhas were blown up. Now, at that time, the Taliban was in power in Afghanistan. The Taliban didn't care about the Bamiyan Buddhas. They regarded these as valueless, or indeed countervaluable, as a desecration of their own beliefs, which was quite tragic because, of course, these Bamiyan Buddhas stood for the beliefs of hundreds of millions of people. They were poised on that historic Silk Road that united people, and they were a treasure and part of the cultural heritage of all human beings, not just the people that lived in Afghanistan, and certainly not the cultural heritage of the Taliban. So in many cases, I think you have people recognizing, and we have to do more in terms of inculcating that idea that these objects of heritage that are considered important, they may be considered important by one regime and then not another regime, and then somebody else takes power and they say they're not that important. But many of these cultural heritage sites, many of these objects have importance for all of us as human beings. We all share in them. And so there's a kind of universal, I think, importance to these. And we need to heighten people's understanding of that. Look, my song, you might not like my song. You might not like my statues. You might not care about art, but at least you should respect it. And respect that somehow that's important to me. And I think the biggest thing the U.S. Does and stands for, actually, because the United States is composed of people who've come from all over the world, more so than any other nation that exists on Earth and has ever existed on Earth, we have such a cultural diversity within. We know that the religion, the artworks, the languages, the songs, the tales, the dress, the holidays, the rituals are so important to the people who've composed the U.S. that in order to have a civil society in the United States, we've learned over the period of a few hundred years that respecting those beliefs and people's cultures is incredibly important. And I think that's a good lesson. Now, sometimes we've learned that lesson in a hard way. The U.S. has grappled with its own notions of cultural intolerance, of not respecting the views of and the cultures of certain people. Native Americans for a period of our history, which the government was trying to wipe out and destroy their culture. Now we have a National Museum of American Indian on the Mall in Washington in the shadow of the U.S. Capitol, because the nation respects those diverse American Indian ways, the knowledge and the beliefs that reside within those groups. So I think the U.S. has learned a lesson about the respect for culture, the respect for majority, minority, diverse groups. And I think that's a lesson that is well respected by the rest of the world and can be emulated by the rest of the world as a good thing. And it's something that I think the U.S. takes the leadership in, we have some pride over, but I think it's something that all countries can share. I think it's a good universal value.